the clouds part, my Dodda is on the move. Her locks flap in the wind. She hides the flaps on her skin. She always finds a way to burrow inside herself and position her limbs in the shadows of the sun. She runs faster each time reality catches up. When India rises from its trout-lipped slumber, her basket is already filled with buds. Jasmine sugarcoats her already strained smile. She'll have to fix that by noon and prepares to string itself to garlands. Dodda works its milky color to a lather, rubbing until a bumpy rose envelops her brown. Not cream. She'll try again tomorrow. At 11, she bustles down flights of stairs, kneading dough until the salt that drips from her face is enough seasoning, until the blood that washes over henna-headed hands flavors the dough with sindoor. So she sweets some across her forehead and prays, clasps her hands together, asks for a new face. At 12, she dons 4 tins of lunch and a crimson sari to wash out the weakness. Her feet are quick. Her husband's are quicker. When he's through, her wavering teeth, more ocean than stronghold, attack their own hands over and over and recrudescent waves over and over, and 3 p.m. And she teeters spoons on her palms to prepare for the weight of the world on her shoulders. Her niece, who once painted the solar system on the back of her eyelids, lost her planets on Earth. The ones who aren't pretty have to be smart. Dodda can't marry them off right away. Her daughter-in-law is growing grayer and frailer by the day. Men like a little meat on the bones. More cooking for Dodda. And her daughter, who lives miles and miles away, runs at the same time as her every morning to connect to the life she once knew, shuffling down gated neighborhoods and Adidas, while Dodda turns around to watch for hungry eyes in sandals that peel at the heels. The nightjar sings in tune with the landline. Quiet, subliminal darkness unfolds the cloak of nighttime. 13,000 miles away, we are greeting the sun. My sister and I prattle on and on about carnivals and tank tops, about new dreams, goals, ideas, opportunities. Dodda, when are you going to come see us in America? Soon, Bangaru, soon. And she tucks herself in with a blanket that steams like rice and wishes her dreams into our realities. My poem, Dodda Day, the kind of inspiration behind it was, of course, my grandmother, because Dodda means grandmother in my language. And it was a poem that I took a while to write. It was something that I've wanted to draft for a while, seeing the realities of the situation in India and the social atmosphere there versus here, where we've led much more privileged of lives. And I kind of just wanted to write about the differences between my culture there, part of my life, and the other part of my life here. Why poetry? Why not poetry? I feel like I've listened to poetry since I was little. I've really been writing since I was 6, writing songs in particular, and I felt like that was a natural transition over to poetry. And being introduced to that early on, it was almost as if poetry was meant for me. Writing was the path that was meant for me. Every single time something happens to me, I want to write it down. I want to draft it in some way. That's the best way I know how to communicate, and that's the way I also show love to other people. And I have so much that I want to say, and I've always had so much I want to say. Poetry is something, and writing is something that people are going to listen to regardless of who the author is, because they connect with the work.
Yo, that's what I'm talking about right there. Brothers and sisters, mothers and misters, even if you're non-binary, no matter how you identify, it's time to get fly. This is Patrick Washington, aka Black Picasso of the Almighty Poem C. Salute. I'm here to have a conversation, man, with some of the most talented writers that I know. I'm really looking forward to this. This is why I took the job. I'm gonna tell y'all, I took the job for moments like this here. I get to find some of my favorite authors, poets, and just creative minds, and bring them together in the same room and just see what happens. So this is, this is an experiment, and I'm just excited to sit back and watch like a fly on the wall. We're bringing in my man Alan King. He's going to be in conversation with Derrick Weston Brown. We've got one of my inspirations, Joel Diaz Porter, aka DJ Renegade. We have SAIDA Agostini, and she's going to be in conversation with the sister Tafisha Edwards. And rounding it out, we have young Gabriella Orozco, and she's going to be talking to me. So we're going to have a good time, and we're just going to chop it up and find out like what makes these authors tick, man. This is the WBL Book Fair. As part of the Word Power Festival. And yeah, look, I mean, I'm not going to be one to beat around the bush. So I'm going to jump right into it and bring in the one and the only. Well, let me just read the bio so that like he doesn't get like, bashful while I'm reading it. So I'll just start off and just say, born and raised in Pittsburgh. This brother is a performance poet. He has served in the U.S. Air Force and worked for several years as a professional disc jockey in the DC area under the name DJ Renegade. Word. Can anybody hear me? I'm getting a message. Yo, how's the sound? Okay. Alan, you said yeah? Okay. All right. So yeah. Okay, cool. I'm gonna keep it going then. Thank you. Brandon. Yo, work on that, and I'll get back to you. Joel Diaz Porter. His poetry engages the act of improvisation through explorations of intimacy, jazz music, and family heritage. In addition to his own CD of jazz and poetry, Libation Song, he has been featured on the CD anthology Meow, Spoken Word from the Black Cat. I also remember another book that we'll talk about later. He's been featured in the anthologies Bum Rush the Page, a Deaf Poetry Jam, and Catch the Fire, a cross-generational anthology of contemporary African-American poetry. He's been featured on the Today Show and the documentaries Voices Against Violence, Slam Nation, and as well, I think he was, you can catch a peek of him in the feature film Slam as well. His honors include the James Madison University's Furious Flower Emerging Poet Award, a second place finish in the National Poetry Slams individual competition, and 2 first place finishes in the Haiku Slam competition. He is a Cave Canem Fellow and a member of has been a member of DC's Writers Corps. And I know right about now he's probably itching to, get out into somebody's poker table and make some money. But I'm glad he made some time with us today. So I want to bring in my brother DJ Renegade, aka Joel Diaz Porter. Let me talk to him real quick. Where are you?
Yo, what's the word?
Hey, look at that, man. Yo, I got a little bit, but you got a lot of bit.
Yeah, man. That's because I'm lazy, man. I ain't got time for all that grooming and shit.
Word. How you feeling? Where are you in the world right now?
I'm in Atlantic City.
Like I thought. You make your time. That's how you make your living for the most part, yeah?
Allegedly, yeah.
Right. I'm not gonna put you on blast too much, right? Look. But yeah. Look. So let me jump right in and just ask you a couple of questions. And this is a real treat for me because I've always wanted to ask you some of these things. Now that you are the OG poet, how do you feel about the moniker DJ Renegade? I've always known you as such, but you know, I've noticed, like, you know, how Larry Fishburne turned into Lawrence Fishburne, you know, and certain people, they kind of, you know, kind of put what they deem their younger days behind them and kind of carry a new, you know, a new, I don't know what you call it, you know, they fly a new flag, so to speak, you know what I mean? I still call Priest. I still call my man Ultra, but because that's how I met them and that is how I identify with them. But like, how do you feel about that name now?
I mean, it's cool. I mean, what happened is when I first started DJing, when I was in the Air Force, this would have been like 1980, 1981. First, I was Jazzy J. And then I found out there was another more famous Jazzy J. So that wasn't going to work. Right. So there was a cat that would call himself Jazzy Jeff. So I called myself Jazzy Joel. Right. And so I did that for a minute. And actually, when I first came to DC, that was the name that I used. But what happened was I had this job as a mainframe computer operator. And I used to do things a little differently sometimes in terms of operating procedure than other people. And so one day my supervisor said to me, you know, damn, Joe, why you always got to be such a renegade? And so at the time I was kind of looking for, a different DJ name anyway. So this would have been like 84, 85, somewhere around there. So I started using DJ Renegade as my DJ name. And then of course I was a nightclub DJ for like, the next 17, 18 years. And that's what I became known as. But then the slide into poetry, of course, happened. And actually, I was known as a poet before I had like 5 or 6 poems, just because of the song "Pressed Against the Glass" on DJ Kool's album.
Okay.
Where he had the little spoken word piece that I wrote. And so I was credited on that. And so
I remember that very well. I remember that. I had that album and I did not know you at the time. I did not know of you. And then I found out later that you had written that poem that he spit at the end.
Right. And so then I started doing more poetry and people wouldn't stop calling me DJ Renegade. So I just rolled with it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I was DJ Renegade. You know what I'm saying? It didn't seem to me, I never went to somebody and said, no, my name is, such and such. And anyway, DJ Renegade is easier to say for a lot of people than Joel Diaz Porter, which is hyphenated and, got a little Portuguese in it or whatever. So I just rolled with it. And then when I started doing the slam, a lot of people had stage names anyway. So it just, it was just a natural fit. But going back to a funny thing that you just said, like how you still call Priest. DJ Kool still calls me Jazzy.
Oh, wow.
I don't think Kool ever called me Renegade when he was talking to me. You know what I'm saying? He might have referred to me as Renegade, like to somebody else, but he still calls me Jazzy to this day.
Wow. See, so that's way back. He was one of the originals there.
Yeah, Kool, his cousin, a couple other people that I know from, all the way back then. But so anyway, that's what happened. I started doing poetry. People kept calling me Renegade. It was my name. I was cool with it. I actually don't like to be called DJ because it's an occupation, not a name. Okay. But some people from outside of like hip hop culture don't really get that. You know what I'm saying? So it's whatever. So yeah.
I mean, that was one of the reasons, and I've always, every time I say this, I always say, there would have been no me without you. That's not really true, but what it is that, like, you're not the reason I became a poet, because I was an MC at first, and then I became kind of like, as I became disillusioned with, where the direction the rap was taken, I kind of started writing poetry about hip hop, right? And but you're the reason that I found the mug. You're the reason that I found 15 minutes, and you're the reason I found 8 Rock, because, I kind of, although I was kind of like, searching this mythical figure that I read about, I kind of found this whole entire family, you know what I'm saying?
Community,
and that was, so, definitely, hats off to you for that, man. Tell me about Pittsburgh. Tell me about Pittsburgh. You grew up, that's where you came from originally, yeah?
Yeah, I grew up, in the Steel City, Three Rivers, in a housing project on the south side of Pittsburgh, notorious housing project called Sinclair Village. which most people have never heard of. Probably the most famous person that people have heard of who comes from Sinclair Village is Phyllis Simon, the R&B singer. And there was also a notorious serial killer named Gino Sproul, who in Pennsylvania, at least for a little while, was famous because he was holed up in St. Clair when he committed a couple of his more notorious crimes. But anyway, I would, born and raised there. We lived in St. Clair. I lived in, I lived in Pittsburgh 17 out of my first 18 years. But there was a small period of time in 1968 where, for whatever reason, I was 6, so I don't really know. Actually, I was 5, so I don't really know. We moved to Baltimore. And so we lived in Baltimore for about 8 or 9 months. And my main memory from Baltimore is that we lived there in April of 1968, which, for people who are old enough or people who are history buffs know, that's the month when Martin Luther King was assassinated. And so that's my main memory, actually, from the time we lived in Baltimore, was coming in the house and, the news. It was Walter Cronkite and everybody was crying. And, it was just complete bedlam. And then the next thing you know, you got National Guard, soldiers in the streets and all kinds of stuff. But other than that, shortly after that, we moved back to Pittsburgh and we lived there from that point on. So Pittsburgh's a huge part of my identity. It shows up in my poetry.
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah, because you had a couple of Pittsburgh pieces, I recall, also your childhood. And I wanted to see if you maybe had one of those you could share. I particularly remember one. It was about your mama and Christmas.
Mama After Midnight.
Yeah. That?
I don't know if I can find it right now.
Okay, no, never mind.
But I got some, I always got to represent the 412. So I got a couple of pieces.
Let me hear one, please. Yeah, let me hear it, please.
So since I referenced Phyllis Simon earlier, I'll go ahead and read this poem. And so I don't know who your audience is. I'm assuming that they're a lot younger than I am. So Phyllis Simon was an R&B singer in the 70s, 80s, into the 90s. She was very, very famous, very beautiful, great singer. And she was on Arista Records. Her career was kind of eclipsed when Arista signed Whitney Houston, who, obviously went on to become kind of famous. And she had some mental health issues, and she wound up taking her life in June of, I think, 1991. And so she's like 12 or 13 years older than me, so I didn't know her when I was growing up, but I went to school with her younger brothers and sisters. Wow. Many of whom were also musically talented, And then I did meet her eventually later on in DC. I had dinner with Phyllis Simon in the Union Station food court, which is like,
shut up.
I just like randomly ran into her, and I didn't want to like fanboy out, but obviously like I knew who she was, and she was just in there chilling. She had come down from New York to do a show at Blues Alley, and we was in the same line at Boardwalk Fries getting some fries, and I said hello to her.
Wow.
And she was like, you mind if I sit with you, while I eat? And so, we kicked it for like 15 minutes. It was, one of those just surreal, kind of highlights. So anyway, here's the poem. Now in my book, I'm doing a lot of crazy shit. And so it's very visual. So it's kind of, I have to explain everything that's going on. But as you know, I write haiku and send you Japanese short form poems. And so a lot of those are included in the poem and included in the book. And so I also do this thing where within, say like this poem is called Betcha by Golly Wow. So within the text of the poem, certain words are highlighted. And those highlighted words create an additional poem on top of the poem. And most of those little additional poems are haiku or senryu. And then in addition to that, in this particular poem, I also use footnotes, but the footnotes aren't like data notes, they're actual poems. They're also haiku.
Okay.
So, you know, it's just me trying out some things. The book is called Ideas of Improvisation. So it's just like, you know, me trying out a whole bunch of stuff. So I'm going to read I'll just read the poem. I'll first read the highlighted haiku, then I'll read the sonnet, and then I'll read it again and put in the little short poems that are footnoted. So this is Betcha by Golly Wow for Phyllis Simon. Your lips, naked with June rain. What blue whale is this? Whose child so alone their tasseled scarf of tightly knit notes trails to caress green hills past dusk? Or quotes lush echoes, bouncing like bald fists off stone faces that flail or float in Southside streams, warning throats to beware their half-sip woes, pulling bipolar boxcars in their flow, exiting Sinclair Village to steam. Phyllis, how your lips once puckered with flair, barely brushing our naked neck most nights with lace feathers of whistled melody rippled out of June rain. What air daring still to dip or flutter? Whose kite straining at its cord, dying to twist free? So yeah, that's the poem. And then I'll read it again. This time I'll put in the notes. So I'll just say the number and then I'll read the note. So, what blue whale is this? Whose child so alone their tasseled scarf of tightly knit notes trails to caress green hills past dusk? 1. June darkness, fireflies pulse into police lights. Or quotes lush echoes, bouncing like bald fists off stone faces that flail or float in side streams, warning throats to beware their half-sip woes, pulling bipolar boxcars in their flow, exiting Sinclair Village under steam. 2. Last train, her mascara still running. Phyllis, how your lips once puckered with flair, barely brushing our naked neck most nights with lace feathers of whistled melody rippled out of June rain. What splits our air, daring still to dip or flutter? 3. On the shoulder of the pallbearer, a butterfly. Whose kite, straining at its cord, dying to twist free?
Wow. Yo.
So yeah, that's the joint. I don't know. I still got to work out like reading it. You know what I'm saying? Because it's actually the first time I've read it like this with all the the little
the
parts.
notes. Yeah.
Right. So I call these poly poems because they're poems that are made up of other poems or that include other poems.
Yeah, I was. You know what? See, and now sometimes we got to go in a minute, but I want to ask you, like, you just inceptioned your own poem. You know what I mean? So like, it's so, it's like, and you created the style. You're very adept at and I know you have knowledge of like the various styles of poetry. What is your favorite? Like, would it be sonnets? Was it like lokus? Like, which ones really jump at you?
Look, man, I'll be perfectly honest with you. My favorite poem is any good poem I managed to write. Like, I don't have a preference, you know what I'm saying, in terms of genre or style or anything like that. I really do love Japanese short forms, haiku and senryu, just because it also, the process of writing and revising and dealing with them serves as a form of meditation. And so, I mean, that's probably true of, writing longer poems too. But haiku, because they're small little bite-sized joints, like you can see something. I can be walking down the street and I can see something, the moon or a flower or whatever, and be like, oh, and then the image grabs me, you know what I'm saying? I'd be like, oh, this could be a haiku moment. And then maybe I make some notes in my notes app, or, I get a little scrap of language or whatever. And sometimes the language comes to me in the moment. Sometimes I just make some little notes and then I come back to that, when I get some time. It could be 10 minutes later, it could be a couple hours later, whatever. So that I try to keep that as a ongoing feature of my life. And that's my way of trying to maintain sense of wonder about the world. You know what I'm saying? You know, people always say you got to stop and smell the roses. So like, in a sense, you know, capturing these little haikus, sentient moments is my way of doing that and making sure that I stop and smell whatever they are, tulips, carnations, orchids, you know,
Right.
leftover trees, whatever it is.
Yes, yes. Well, look, that's a great window into your process, because I've always wondered, you know, and I kind of needed that. So, yeah. I wish we could go longer, man. But you know, I messed around and made it just an hour. So, I might try to bring you back for one more piece, but I just want to make sure I give you your flowers and say thank you for inspiring me. I remember sending you my pieces, and you marked the shit up out of them and sent them back. And I appreciate you for that. And yeah. Thank you very
Thanks
much.
for having me, man. And always, you know, remember, you know, just like when you came into the community, I came into a community as well. And there was cats like Reuben Jackson and Brian Gilmore and Kenny Carroll, who, you know, served the same kind of function for me, you know what I'm saying, as evidently I served, you know, for some of y'all. And so all that really was, man, was me trying to you know, maintain that flow. You know what I'm saying? You know, the same way the cats, you know, people were there for me, you know, I tried to be there for, you know, for other people as well. So thanks for having me, man. You know, I'm always, you know, grateful for the chance to kick some poems.
Yes. Thank you again, Joel. And yeah. Stay close. So
Likewise.
yes. So yeah. So that was Joel Diaz Porter. And next, well, I'll do it again. There you go. And we're gonna have we're gonna bring up next. We're gonna bring up the brothers. We'll bring up my brother. No. Or should I give it to the sisters? What do y'all think? I'll tell you what. I'm going to bring up the sisters. That would probably be yeah. I'm going to bring up the sisters, Tafisha Edwards and SAIDA Agostini. Where are y'all at? Y'all around? Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm blessed. Thank you very much, both of you, for taking part in this. Hopefully, you know, we'll learn something that we didn't know before. So I'm just going to be a fly on the wall. I'm going to sit back and get out of here and let you guys just have at it. Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Tafisha.
Yeah, how are you doing?
I'm good. You look fabulous as always.
How do you? It's giving spring.
You know, I'm trying to do a little bit, just a little.
So, for those in the audience who don't know, SAIDA and I share heritage. We may be cousins, but at the very minimum, we're both Guyanese. So, it's all a family. So, SAIDA, I wanted to speak to you about your wonderful collection, Let the Dead In.
I have it right here. Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to begin with the land. Before you and I and our families, there was Guyana, the land of many waters.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to speak about the myths that you brought into the future. You know, sometimes folklore, usually it serves a purpose to warn someone. In this case, there's the moon gazer, for example, who was a supernatural slave catcher. There's the mermaid, Old Hag. And for me, what I know, of course, La Diablesse and the silk cotton tree. So why bring these myths forward? We're in a modern age, and it could be quite easy to leave them behind.
Yeah, sure. So I really appreciate that question. And I'm pretty sure that somewhere, if we did the work, we'd find out we were cousins. You know, so when I think about mythology, like what comes to mind for me is this conversation I got to have with a mythologist in Guyana. And he said something that has really stayed with me. And he talked about the fact that mythology in Guyana was created to subject and oppress Black and brown people, right? Like, so when you think about kind of the major figures, right? Like you know, there's the mermaid. Well, in Guyana, right, like there's a whole bunch, you know, you just talked about the land of many waters. So if you're an enslaved person, you would think, okay, well, let me escape by water. But if you know there is a bloodthirsty water baby that's in the water that could potentially kill you, you're going to stay away from the water, right? The same thing with the moon gazer. You know, we had enslaved folks, indentured servants that were working the field, you know, tending to sugarcane. And, you know, obviously folks weren't getting enough food. And one of the things that would happen is that folks would go back out at night to steal the sugarcane, right? To feed their children and to feed themselves. So if you're told that there is a scary 7-foot tall monster with huge red eyes ready to kill you out in those fields, you're probably not going to go out to those sugar canes. And so for me, like these myths like came an opportunity to like reimagine these stories and do it in a way that like brought back some power to Black and brown folks.
Yes, I agree. And again, these tales were passed down to me as a child as a kind of like warning method. You know, don't go into the woods, don't rebel. Because beyond the eyes of my parents, there were the supernatural eyes as well. And I wanted to kind of move forward into the poem Notes on Archiving Erasure, partially because it does tie in to our conversation on myths and how their true purpose is erased. And so all we're left is with tales. There's a line in your poem, childishly, I thought we could retell stories. I mean to say I can't lie. And so I wanted to ask about your grandmother in relation to, in a continuum of speaking about, you know, what is a race and why let her in.
Yeah, so I mean, I think, you know, as with a lot of Black folks, right? Like when we start talking about like the family business, right? The things that we don't want to let out there, I think there's a lot of fear and hurt, right? Like how will people see us? What will people think about us, right? And I remember, you know, so I'm a survivor of domestic violence. You know, I definitely witnessed it in my home. I'm also a survivor of sexual abuse. And you know, a lot of times, like I remember, you know, talking to family members about things that happened, and folks were like, well, it wasn't that bad, right? Like, or, you know, you're overstating, you're being overdramatic. It's the American in you. And, you know, I think that's a whole other conversation that we don't need to get into right now. But there is something to be said, right? Like, I don't think we diminish out of a way to like try to cause more harm or pain. But if you start to acknowledge the pain that I've experienced, what does that mean about the things that have happened to you in your life? It forces you to go back and redefine it, right? And so, you know, when I think about like my grandmothers and all of the women that have come before me that have dealt with like abusive husbands and infidelity, like writ large, right? I mean, and also real talk, this is always why I get so annoyed when folks like Steve Harvey and folks are like, you know, my grandparents stayed together until they were like, you know, for 55 years. And I was like, well, that's because divorce wasn't legal, you know, or women didn't have the right to get their own bank account, right? And so, you know, I think there's something, you know, when I think about this work, I think about it as like an opportunity to like not just like set me free, but like to help do the healing work, to help the people and the women that have come before me.
I wanted to segue into the poem Granny Teaches Her Children How to Eat Poison. And I would love for you to speak more about the kind of dual methods of one encouraging, you know, a hard truth of how to live with, I would say, you know, a metaphoric poison in this specific case. But on the reality of survival and how we might transform a lesson that is quite painful for us and for the people who teach us, and how do we transform that into our liberation practices.
Yeah, and if you wouldn't mind, I'd actually like to just read it because I think it just might be helpful for folks. So wait, let me find it. It's always fun to like go through and like look at my book, you know, as opposed to like looking through a Google Doc, which is normally what I would do. So I just want to name that. Granny teaches her children how to eat poison. The lesson starts in Essequibo, the summer of 1965. A crowded kitchen, fat with pleading, another yellow gal, 20 with 3 children, all hungry and wailing, "Mummy, where daddy?" 21 days spent restless, waiting and waiting by an unforgiving door, an empty larder, restless steel pots clanging on the stove. And it goes on like this, with her father shamed home after 3 weeks of sweetness with another woman, back to his own starving children, nursed on boiled white rice, spiced with casrip, his own belly big with love, while his wife spends time into fields of obeisance. All this love that cannot be made into survival without him. 3 weeks of hunger becomes love. The women he fucks, ghosts, and so on until she can't eat without that lump in her throat that makes her want to bawl out into the street, screaming, "Me husband don't want me. Me husband don't want me." Watch her banging and banging these pots, cooking down truth into an inchoate stew, domesticate hurt into a monster we trust more than our own eyes. Help us still love a congregation of men in the brute country that made them, until we while away whole lifetimes singing hymns that make us fat with belief. He doesn't beat me. It's the evil eye. Why leave him? This litany sang as she watches the blossoming bruise on my own mummy's arms. 20 years later, while I play house at their feet, set a plate brimming before her and say, "Eat," meaning let your children live. So I think like the truth that I was trying to get at there, right, is, so I think so often, like when we talk about domestic violence, right, like I think there's a huge part of us that's like, well, why don't they just leave? Why don't people just leave? And I think that, the reality is, when I look at people in my family, right, or like other families, like you're making really hard choices, right? Like, so if you leave, what does that mean about your children's ability to eat, right? Or if you leave, what does that mean about like your children's ability to access education, access stability, access all the things that you want for them? I am very aware, that as a Black queer woman, the only reason that I have the success that I have is because on some levels, my mother sacrificed her happiness for me. And quite frankly, so did my father. And that's a hard truth to sit with. And I think that that is an experience that I think particularly as Black folks, Black women, immigrants, like I think that's a legacy that we wrestle with every day, right?
Absolutely. And compromises are what keep us alive sometimes.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself is another book that you might write.
Mm-hmm.
So pivoting, I wanted to speak about the section in your book called American Love.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the people that I would go out on a limb and tell me if I'm wrong to say that you love, Rakia Boyd, Tamir Rice, Eric Garner, Racy Taylor, among others. Please don't mind the pain. Why frame them as part of an American love story? Personally, sometimes all we know is a name, a hashtag, a death that we might find in an obscure book. And I think positioning them as part of American love is quite interesting. And so I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. So I think that came up for a couple of different reasons, right? Like, so I remember when, there is a lot more resonance around naming the murders of Black folks. And really seeing that when these like kind of public moments of public grief would happen, oftentimes it wouldn't be about Black women or non-binary people or Black youth. It would always be about Black cis het men, right? And I could grieve. I was grieving alongside other folks, right, for those people, because they're a part of our community, right? But what I struggled with was the fact that I never felt like I would be grieved if I was killed, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing that I struggled with as well is this idea that this is what you would be known for, right? Like, you know, when we talk about all of these like Black folks that have been killed, they were so much more than the ways in which they were murdered. They were full, whole people that loved and were loved, right? And so I wanted to create spaces where, yes, we talked about the violence, we talked about what happened to them, but we also I was also exploring the agency that they had in their own lives, because I need to know that no matter how I die, I will not just be remembered by who killed me.
In the book, From Black Lives Matter to Black Liberation by Kigana Yamada Taylor. Kigana, if you ever come across this, I apologize if I mispronounced your name. But there is a quote: "It is the struggle itself that can compel people to push for more." And I thought about that particularly when I read the section, American Love. And so I wanted to know what you find more is for the continued struggles as queer people, as Black people, as unwelcome guests in the home that is America.
Mm-hmm.
What is more to you?
You know, so interestingly enough, I did like a poetry workshop with a group of young Black folks. And I asked them to go around and tell me, how would they know Black people are free? What would a world where Black people are free would look like? And this one young Black girl, she couldn't have been more than like 12 or 13. She said to me, "I will know Black people are free when it is okay for us to make mistakes." And like my heart like just broke.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because this baby knows already what is going on. And for me, when I think about more, and it's interesting, right, to try to quantify what more is, but when I think about more, I think about the fact that like, I want our babies to move through this world without having to wrestle with that burden. I want them to go outside, to fuck up, and to know that they will come home safe at the end of the night.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it is heartbreaking to know that that much stress and self-policing, if we're going to call it something, occurs in our own bodies and the bodies of our young people and our young children.
Yeah.
To pivot for a second, to go back, I wanted to speak about your poem, Harriet Tubman is a Lesbian. Just, you know, Harriet Tubman is not a myth, right? She's an actual Black woman, very invested in the business of freedom. But, you know, I just found the imaginative turn in allowing both Harriet into the space and also your queerness, your incredible sex life, sharing that with us. And so I didn't want us to end our conversation on something quite so heavy. I would love to think about the joy that as someone who knows you purposely, always privileges and you lead with that joy, and that includes physical joy as well.
Mm-hmm. It sure does. Yeah, and I'd be happy to like read it to close this out. Yeah, and so I will say that I kind of wrote this poem as like an act of resistance, because I started telling people that Harriet Tubman was a lesbian, and folks were like, "SAIDA, that's not true," which is fair, but I decided it should be true, right? And it's also because as Black queer folks, we deserve ancestors, we deserve elders, and so this was my attempt to do that. That has actually caused some anger. So here you go. Harriet Tubman is a lesbian. Remember the time I said Harriet Tubman was a lesbian and laughed straight for 15 minutes? Jabari said, "Fuck that. Harriet wasn't trying to turn the underground into Henrietta's." But shit, I need a hero, a full-on Black queer woman setting fire to slave ships, cursing out white motherfuckers, and going home to love on Phyllis Hyman's fine-ass great-great-granny. I want a history where Harriet and Sojourner get together and make that cataclysmic, head-banging, good God kind of love, while Luther serenades them with skin so shining it looks like he just swam all up in Johnson's & Johnson's. I want him there singing to them. His sequin blazer, the North Star, they follow hand in hand under the cover of knotted trees and vines that rise up to hide them. The glow of lightning bugs, grasshoppers humming as Luther executes a smooth two-step to Wait for Love. Prince behind him, humping the stage. Oh, in that moment, when Sojourner bends down, cups her hands, dips them into a running creek and says, "Come on, Harriet, drink." Watches the soft pulse and bend of her woman's neck as she feeds sweet water from her palm, and she thinks, someday I'll make me a poem about how I love her. That night, the first time they found the salt to kiss, while Luther reapplies his eyeliner and Prince takes over the mic, crooning, "Baby, baby, baby, what's it gonna be tonight?" Sojourner and Harriet latching on to each other's bodies, sucking nipples like they deliver honeyed wine, hollering a blue joyful streak over and over in an answering chorus. Thank you.
A pleasure, as always, to be in conversation with you.
The feeling is very mutual. Thank you.
Wow. Yo, that last one was fire. Oh, and I wasn't ready for Prince. I wasn't ready for the vocals. So thank you for that as well. Yo, Tafisha, thank you for a great job. I can tell there's a kinship, between y'all. So that it felt good to watch it. So appreciate you. Thank both of you for your energy. And I put up the link once more for everybody. Yes, let the dead in. Get it. So yeah. Next up's the Brethren. So let me bring in Alan King. What's up, fam?
Hey.
Uh-oh, am I frozen still?
No, not for me.
Okay, all right. I think I might have gotten too close. I gotta be sure not to move to technical difficulties in the building. You know how we do. And the homie, yo, DWB.
Brother D.
Hello. How you doing?
Good to see y'all, man. Yeah. I'm not outside like I should be, so I don't see y'all that much. But I'm glad we're doing this.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us, man.
No, thank you.
Yes. So once again, I'm gonna get out of here and just let y'all just have at it. All right.
All right.
All right. Let me get rid of that. And
All right. Hey, first of all, SAIDA and Tafisha. You know what? Wow. I could look in the chat of the event and just seeing, the commentary about just some of the notes and some of the thoughts and just some of the perspective that SAIDA and Tafisha were sharing. And I was just like, get, as my grandparents would say, getting learnt, as they say. Oh man, Alan King, good to see you. I mean, we see each other often.
We act like we ain't see each other last week.
How long has it been? I don't think I just saw you last week. Oh man, but it is good to be able to sit here and talk with you about Crooked Smiling Light. There it is.
Thanks, man.
Plan B Press. Shout out to a DMV Press, most definitely. And I realized although I've been on the other side of you, seeing you put this manuscript together, and then the efforts that it took to get it out there. I realized I don't think we've talked about each other's books to each other, in a public forum. But I wanted to jump in because there's so many different poems that I know you can read from. But there's a quote from a review from the Drizzle Review Journal, and I found it very appropriate for describing, I would say, not only just this book, but also just your writing style. And I think it's Devin Baldwin writes, crooked smiling light moves from punch to caress, offering the lie of easy and sudden transformation, but in the hard-fought zigzag feint of everyday effort. And I definitely think when I hear the line about like that crooked smiling light moves from punch to caress and the zigzagging, I mean, it really does relate to the title on itself. And I was wondering, how does crooked smiling light give the reader an idea of what they're in for when they open up your book?
So it's funny, like at AWP, I was, explaining to a lot of people the title. Funny thing is, like when people get the book, nobody has ever asked me about the title, where it comes from. But I'll just say, the title comes from, it comes from a worldview that my dad has that was passed to me. And then, of course, I took that and just carried it further with my own understanding. But one of the things my dad would always say is that, no matter how hard something is, a situation that you're going through, if you keep pushing through it, eventually things would have to look up. Like it'll get to a point where you're so low, the only way you can go is up. So with that in mind, and just life experiences, and things that I've experienced, things I've watched other people experience, kind of just started looking at life as like, life being this presence of light, and that light, it's kind of cliche, but metaphorically, it is the joys that we celebrate. And, but, with that presence of light, there are also, unfortunate circumstances. We deal with loss, we deal with all kinds of unexplained things. And because life is the way that it is, it's that pattern of light. That light is not a straight path. It's kind of jagged. And so, and it's been helpful thinking of or having that view of life for myself, because then I'm like, okay, if I'm going through a moment where I think I'm in darkness, I'm not really in darkness. I'm just going through what I now know is the bend in that light. And then eventually, if I keep going, I'm going to come out into light again. And so an example of that was, like years ago when my wife was diagnosed with lupus just as we got engaged. And then, 2017 comes and we get the news that she's transplant. And then, so that's us in the bend. And then, us coming out into light is like having a solution for it and being able to go through with that, which was surgery. So it's, but the book kind of deals with that. Like you're in light one moment, you go through the bend, and then you're back in light. So I'll say that here, so that folks that know where the title comes from, they know what they're in store for when they open the book.
Cool, thank you. I mean, and I mean, there are different kind of like examples of the bending of the light that you talk about, aside from the light inside, and then beacon, which is another type of light, whether we're talking about, kind of like a strobe or type of thing, or even into the light. But I would wonder if you would read Into the Light, because I know, I mean, you and I being, best friends, I know what several of the backstories are to a lot of these poems. And so it's always fascinating to see I guess the poems that come from the experience. And I think you and I both talked about, like, there'd be times where it's like, oh, when people ask the dreaded question of poets and writers, so what are you writing? And you're like, you know what? I'm not writing right now.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you're not
being
living.
okay with that, being okay with not writing anything at the moment because you're just not moved to.
Or the fact that you're living, like you're literally living. And so, I mean, some of my responses are, I'm always writing, like I'm living right now. So trust, there's always things there that are creating the things that will create some writing. But I would wonder if you would read Into the Light.
Sure. And so this was, just a quick backstory. This was the poem I wrote the day after the surgery. So I was in the hospital bed writing this poem. So this is Into the Light. You're a floor below me, healing in your room. Both of us soar from the divine puppetry of science. God pulling the surgeon's strings, sliding the kidney from inside me, routing it to its new body in Connecticut. And wasn't he present in the hand's deft dance and how hope lit the operating room like a stage? Your new kidney ready for its debut inside you, having traveled in a freight of prayers, 17 hours from Minneapolis to DC. Didn't our road here seem even longer, not being a direct match? The hiccup in lab results, us hurling our names into an exchange pool deep with uncertainty. And here we are in our beds, an elevator ride from each other. This moment, like the 90-degree day beyond our windows, the cloudless sky, shadows receding in the sunlight. That's it.
Thank you. When I think about, the story behind that poem, but I also think of the journey that it took for Crooked Smiling Light to come out. I think about the time when when you were writing this manuscript, and then considering the pandemic and all sorts of other things that had literally happened. It reminds me of there's a line from The Light Inside where the speaker says, "Patience is the currency of anything worth having." And so when I think of that word, of that line that the speaker you wrote, I mean, Crooked Smiling Light took a while to release, and when you factor in a pandemic and just in general what's going on in the world, do you still adhere to this line, "Patience is the currency of anything worth having," given that there were times when you may have wanted the poems to be out in the world when you wanted them to, and then at the time being like, is this ever going to happen? And then just sometimes circumstances beyond anyone's control. Is this still something that you adhere to?
I think that it applies to everything, not even just with poetry. Like, I mean, real simple, real face value. You have folks that will run out and buy something, impulsively, right? But had they waited, that thing would have gone on sale. They would have got it much
A coupon would have been, you just waited, coupon in the Sunday paper.
So and so it applies to everything, man. And I think too, I thinking about it, like actually it came from a quote. I forgot who it came from, but I remixed it. So it was like, what was it? It was patience, something. It was like several other things in there, the currency, blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
But the patience part definitely, I felt much more connected to that because, just thinking about, when I watch people who are successful, their success didn't come right away. It came as a result of patience. And I don't know K.C. Lehman, but K.C. Lehman, I remember an interview that he did, and he was like, "Man, I was working on my craft. People see me now." And he's like, "Yeah, I didn't just get dope overnight."
Exactly.
So patience for K.C. was, putting in the craft, putting in the time, and then eventually, him getting his flowers and stuff like that, after putting in the hard work. So I definitely stand by it. And that's, and it still guides me, when I'm impulsive and want to do something. I think of the folks that waited and how much more of a payoff they got from doing that, personally, professionally, whatever that is.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. And speaking of, the payoff, I mean, just knowing to do a callback to Joel Diaz Porter, knowing that his book is coming out soon, and Where's some cats have been waiting? Like, is it coming? Is it all right? We waiting on it. So it's always a wonderful thing that you think about the payoff. I think of the same of when I think about SAIDA's book coming out and SAIDA being able to have the book event that she should have had, due to the pandemic, and just knowing what that feeling is like, best laid plans, and when those things are able to come to fruition.
Well, I say SAIDA, Tafisha, even like Destiny, with Dr. Birdsong. A lot of these folks, these folks that whose work I admire, and so it's like when that news hits that this person book dropping, that person. I mean, it's like I'm getting hyped. Like my favorite artists dropping their albums again, and I'm like, all right, I gotta
like Black Star,
Oh my gosh, yeah,
yes,
but that's the excitement, and I think that's the patience is currency, is that the timing is right for when this stuff is happening, the payoff for readers, the payoff for admirers, like it's everything kind of comes together, at the right moment. So I wholeheartedly stand by that.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I every time I think of like the best waiting, I always think about Sade. Folks will wait for 10, 15 years for a Sade album. We'll wait. Some people like Beyonce dropped one without telling us. When's the next album coming out? Rihanna, Sade, we'll wait. But that's
Janelle Monáe.
Janelle Monáe, we'll wait. We'll wait. That's the precedent that's set. And the last thing I wanted to speak with you on before before we go, it goes back to what you were saying about the title, and about that's how your dad's philosophy of looking kind of like at the world, or how to proceed in the world, when there's moments of darkness, and or not even darkness, but just the bending of the light. And I think about the poem What Son Said. And for me, what I really appreciate about that poem is, I think I was teaching some students the other day about, there was a period where you didn't write about your parents. Poets, you didn't do that confessional poetry. No, don't touch the parents. Whether praising parents, fine, but even critique, to that degree was like, whoa, what are you doing? And so you and I, my relationship, with my father who passed, and such, and how he and I came to an understanding. Wasn't perfect, but there's that. But what I admire the most about the poems that you've written about your father is this, I don't know if I would even call it, what is that word? It's just you. I don't even want to call it bravery. It's just you without, I don't know, hesitation. You can correct me if I'm wrong. How you speak about you and your father's relationships, and how you're able to weave critique within these poems, but still keep your father human, and still keep your father as someone that you love. And I wonder if you could, maybe read What Son Said, or just speak on that.
Yeah, I'll read it. I wanted to read it, so I'm glad you brought it up. But I think just real quick, I think part of that, being able to do that, I would not have been able to write this piece if I didn't have kids. And so being a father now, and then going back and looking at the decisions my dad made, and stuff that came up, like I can look at it through a different set of lenses than if I wasn't a parent. So that's been helpful. But yeah, I'll read this poem real quick. It's What's Unsaid.
Okay.
Your father calls and asks you to help him order something online. He thinks it's cool that with your account he gets next day delivery. You laugh at how he treats it, as if instead of a membership he's talking about the television when it first came out, when those who couldn't afford it went over to their neighbors to marvel at the monochrome moving images. Then the irony snaps you back. What your parents comfortably spend would throw your family's budget into crisis. Your folks who own 3 homes and considered buying another just to have it. He's a lifetime away from the skinny 20-year-old who landed here from Trinidad with his mom and 4 sisters. The guy who worked as a union electrician to pitch in with the rent. Even now, when he talks about it, He squints, watching those early years slip beyond his field of vision. He couldn't have called just for help ordering holiday gifts. The smart scales that show your BMI and connect to your smartphone. He asked about his granddaughter, who's putting her dolls down for nap time in the living room. You both laugh when he asks if your wife is behaving, and you say, for now. That laugh takes you back to a sunny place in your childhood, those summers and winter holidays you spent lugging his work bag and running to his truck for switches and fixtures. Didn't you live for those moments in his work van, the one he bought when he left the union to start out on his own? He could imitate anyone, the racist white foreman, the other black electricians who threatened to kick his funny sounding ass. You wanted to be every bit the playboy he was, the brother so stealth, old heads back home had him hollering at sisters for them. You laughed a lot then, only disappointed when it was time to go home. That was before he questioned you being a poet, before the insults and arguments that nearly came to blows in the 6 months he went without talking to you. You watch your daughter painting on a table in your den before she climbs in your lap and snuggles up with a smile. That was once you, resting against your dad on his bed while he flipped through the papers, reading the real estate section. Your nearly 4-year-old, listening to her grandfather on speakerphone, says, Papa, I love you. A dam breaks inside you when your dad's choked voice cracks back, I love you too, sweetheart.
All right, Alan King. Thank you so very much. I appreciate that, man.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed. And if anything, I know I'll talk to you soon. It's a given. Thank you. The words beats of life.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Mhm.
Yo, yeah, I knew it was gonna go off like that. I knew it was just going. I knew that was the vibe I was aiming for, and it worked perfectly. That was it. That was
Thank
it.
you.
Two old friends just chopping it up. But I appreciate that window into your process. I appreciate the camaraderie and the brotherhood that y'all share and the energy. It was great. Get the book, y'all. Crooked Smiling Light. And yo, I want your voice, Alan. I've never told you that before. Yo, your voice, when you read, you're spitting the poems, dude. Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
Oh man.
Yeah. I would.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would get rich. I would get rich off of that. Yeah. Yeah. Never mind. I'm gonna keep that comment to myself. All right, y'all. Yo, I was gonna say, instead of girl 6, I'd be like guy 6. Yeah. But look, that's what we do. That's what we do. We've had a great time. We've got one more author to bring up, and I'm very excited to bring up. Let me talk about it a little bit. Gabriella Orozco is a native of Southeast DC and currently in her freshman year of college, I believe, in the joint program at Columbia University and the Jewish Theological Seminary. Her poetry is inspired by reflections on her Jewish and Latina identity, social justice, literature, and history, and her South African and Nicaraguan family heritage. As the 2019 Washington, D.C. Youth Poet Laureate, she has been known to read her poetry and lead youth poetry writing workshops all across the city and actually the country now. Before the pandemic, she regularly performed at Busboys and Poets, performed at the Kennedy Center, the museum, the American Poetry Museum, the Library of Congress, Planet Word. That's where her book release was held. And she is the 2020 DC Youth Grand Slam champion. So I want to bring up Gabriella Orozco. How are you doing? Oh, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Give me a 5 count if you hear me.
It just took a minute. I was like a bit disoriented. But hello, how are you?
I understand. No, I'm great. I'm great now that you're here. I know you waited, listen to all these old folks talk. So now we got, now we're here to chop it up. So I want to, I've got a lot to talk to you about. We've been working together for off and on for about 2 years now. Are you in your freshman year still, correct?
I am, yes.
Okay.
I'm almost done. Just have like a couple more papers to write.
Man.
And then I'll be back in DC for the summer.
Oh, great. Okay. All right. I'm sure we can, I'm sure we'll be working together in some capacity then once you get back around the way. So how do you feel? Because your first book is entitled
Child of Borrowed Churches.
Child of Borrowed Churches. That's an incredible title. Yeah, tell me about that title.
So the title is in reference to the fact that I grew up in a Jewish community in Southeast DC that didn't have the infrastructure to have its own community building. And so because of that, we operated out of churches. And for me, that's really a testament to the inclusivity and like love of DC, that people are so willing to share among different faiths, among different groups of people. We're willing to share space with one another, break bread with one another. And I think that's something really powerful. And I wanted to acknowledge the fact that even if I don't have a physical, permanent space, I'm still here. And I think, especially for someone who is like a child of immigrants, we're kind of like, we don't have as many roots grounding us to the place, but even if those roots might be borrowed or temporary, they still are there and they still count.
Very much so. Very much so. Yes. Yes. This book was a labor of love. We went through a lot trying to get this book done, didn't we? But hopefully you're happy with it. I'm very happy with it.
I really am. Yeah.
It's a beautiful.
I showed it to my literature professor a few days ago, and she was like, "I'm so excited to read it."
Oh, it's a terrific book, and just a lot of really well put together pieces, and you had one I wanted to talk to you about. I think when you were in the 11th grade, you wrote this piece that was in like 3 movements, and it was, I think it's called the Conquistadors' Currency.
Yes, I did write that. That was like, I'm actually really proud of that piece because I wrote that piece in a time in which I had like graduated from WL's program, and I was like, now what am I going to do? I'm not going to be able to write anything ever again now that I don't have like my mentor to like give me a prompt and tell me what to do. And I would just go to the library after school and I wrote that, and I was like, wait, I can still write. I can still do it.
Yes, you really can. Can I hear a piece of that? You don't have to read the whole thing. Can I hear a piece of it?
Yes, I'm happy to. I will pull that up now. This is the shortest piece of it. It's called, this is not the shortest, but it's my favorite part.
Okay.
Córdoba, 100 centavos, or Córdoba, 100 cents. There are no castles here. There are spinning quarters, 16 thunderclouds clap and shake the coins off course. Crooked highways curve around mountains, your lies twist around your mouth. I tell you that you are not as human as you think. You semi-illiterate, I have seen the beast in you, the insecurity and unstable beams when you blink. I am 50% nightingale, 5% gecko, 2% eagle, 12% some type of tropical creature, 24% animal that likes to tango, and 7% dustings of desert snow. The jaguar lurks, peopleless. He holds his stolen Aztec mace, an obsidian blade, fire-forged and blasphemous. Volcano blood split open like a firecracker that separates 2 fingers. Smoke attempts to choke my face. I crash, a current of molten lava. I careen, scorch, and cook. A child or some lost cousin of mine looks at the sky, sticks out his tongue for a snowflake. How was he supposed to know how ash tastes?
Wow. So, yeah. See, and that's what are you like 15, 16 in that piece?
Yeah, I was 16.
That's wild. Like the Cordoba.
That's like the national currency of Nicaragua, which is the country that my father is from. And really what this piece is about is it's about like the corruption, the legacy of corruption that pervades Nicaragua and plenty of other Latin American, specifically Central American countries. And, you know, we're still like clinging to the heritage of like grappling with like the past 500 years of history in the region of immense violence, and the people are still like not yet entirely free. And that's what this piece is about. And there's currently a dictatorship now in Nicaragua, and it was developing when I wrote this. And this poem is about the fact that, like, in some ways, like the legacies of colonialism still exist today.
Yes. And so your pieces, are you writing social commentary like that a lot, or do you look inward? What are you doing?
I feel like it's a lot easier to look inward, but social commentary when it relates to my life. And for me, because like my father is so deeply invested in Nicaragua and so deeply invested in like what's happening there right now, it is social commentary, but also just becomes deeply personal for me as well. And so now I've written pieces about it in college, and it's been both personal and public, I suppose.
So who do you bounce your poems off of for critique?
Well, I guess now that I'm in college, I don't really know. I used to have a tight squad back in DC, but I'm still finding my way.
Did you have you found a network up there yet?
Not yet, but like the poems come out in bits and pieces, and I'm working on finding one.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, look, there better be a writing club or poetry club or something around there somewhere. We can't leave you hanging, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. You let me see. Are there any common themes that you've noticed continuously come up in your work? Like as I read, your book, you tell me, what have you noticed?
Yeah, I would definitely say that common themes include like struggling with growing up, with being alone, with being someone whose parents are both part of and not part of this culture, and who have memories of something other, memories of something else. So I think that memory is a really big component of that, especially now that I'm in college and I'm far away from home. I'm relying on memory more and more to keep me intact. Sorry, is it
just a little bit, but you came back. You're good.
Okay. I'd be happy to share a poem that I wrote in November, and I think it's like 2 years later, an echo to that first poem that I shared, the Cordoba.
Yeah, please.
So it's called Second Exile. In cramped library stacks, outstruggle itches on the back of my tongue, memories of overheard phone calls, a kind of catharsis, only in mourning the inevitable, my abuela's death, coming sooner most certainly than the end of an autocracy. Am I able to mimic the sounds of my people? Our cadence is catch-all and caught in my chest. It is in the protest clips that I attest my accent matches theirs, accented by rifle booms and rocks thrown towards the dictator's swollen goons. My abuela's voice swings in my ear, the strength of her accent punctuated by my father's cynic mimicry of the way syllables fall out of her mouth so quickly. It's that Central American cadence, a waterfall of rhythm, where there is only rushing, stones skipping over streams, skimming, breaking, continuing. In Spanish, I skim articles for mentions of my father, Command F and type out OROZCO. Most often they follow with the name of his falsified crime. This is only his most recent exile, I must remember. There was no knife on the throat this time, only radio gritado threats, detained friends, los desaparecidos again. The reinforcement of a border does not break him. My own are liquefying, dotted lines that crush lungs. College is a building and breaking of new borders. Home looms farther away, and yet there are more of my people here than I ever knew. I'm missing, yet never calling home, an attempt at reconstruction. I rewire the parts of myself, stolen electricity, volcanoes as blessings that went unseen. Here I retire from the urge to prove I am. I flip the switch, the radio sputters. I reignite as my father prophesied.
Man, look, you have an almost forensic eye for detail, you know, and when you're examining things, like how often do you get reflective? How often do you turn that inward? Because you're good at, you know, marking the things around, but how often do you turn that inward towards yourself? Is it hard?
I feel like I have to do that a lot. Yeah, I'd say that I do that pretty often. I don't always do it the right way. For sure, like sometimes I get like, but I'd say something that like really helps me is just to like think about like how far I've come, no matter like where I am. And I think just like that's a way of like tracking my progress, like not just like as a poet, but as like a person, and like how I'm treating other people and how I'm succeeding in life. I'd say that like introspection is definitely the power of the poet, and so is memory. Like my twin sister, I have a very good memory when it comes to our life together. And so sometimes she'll tell me, you have to remember everything because I'm going to forget it. And if you don't remember it, then like, I'm not going to know what happened to us when we were kids. And so like, I have to be like the person who just remembers everything. So it's like a fun little talent.
Hey, I like that. I forgot that you had a twin sister. You just reminded me of that. But also, you know, it's cool that you're aware that, you know, great artists aren't always great people. So it's good that you're developing as a person as well, you know, and you're definitely turning out to be a wonderful young person. So I appreciate you so much for being here. Last question. Name one of your favorite, your latest favorite poem, either of yours or someone else's.
Ever since the war in Ukraine broke out, I've been reading Ilya Kaminsky's Deaf Republic, which I found to be incredibly powerful. And it talks about like resistance, and it's really interesting the way that it uses language, and it's absolutely incredible. And he has a poem in the beginning that talks about the ways that we can be both complacent or not to war and violence. And I also have been really taken with Césaire's work, Notebook for a Return to a Native Land. He was like a leading post-colonial scholar of the 1950s and the decolonization movements in former French colonies. And
is that frozen on my device or is that live? I cannot tell. Okay. All right. So Gabriella froze. Gabriella Orozco, apparently, but it's all good. It's all good. I'm gonna shout out Child of Borrowed Churches. Definitely. I want to thank everybody. And look, while I have you all here, let me do a little bit of housekeeping, and I'm going to read SAIDA's bio and then give everybody a shout out on our way out. So SAIDA is a queer Afro-Guyanese poet whose work explores the ways that Black folks harness mythology to enter the fantastic. SAIDA's first collection of poems, Let the Dead In, right there, Let the Dead In, get that link, was a finalist for the Center of African American Poetry and Poetics 2020 Book Prize, as well as the New Issues Poetry Prize. She is the author of Stunt, that's a dope name, a chapbook exploring the history of Nellie Jackson, a Black woman entrepreneur who operated a brothel for 60 years in Natchez, Mississippi. Her poetry can also be found in the Black Ladies Brunch Collective's anthology, Not Without Our Laughter, and other publications. So I want to thank SAIDA. I want to thank Gabriella. I want to thank Alan King. I want to thank Joel Diaz Porter. I want to thank Derrick for helping out. I want to thank Tafisha for helping out. All of y'all are beautiful. This has been a wonderful event for me. I don't know how y'all felt about it, but I loved it. I love the energy. I love learning more about each of you. Yeah, this is the WBL Word Power Fest. And I want everybody to stay tuned because this evening, we have two more events. We have Getting Free is happening. It's going to be a queer showcase. Some of our favorite poets. We got Reggie Kabiko hosting. We've got Dwayne Bean. We've got Ishani Shanda. We've got a lot of great poets who are going to be sharing with us. We've had young Charlotte Molesky. Is going to be dope. So that's going to be at 5 p.m. this afternoon. And then later tonight, man, we got David and Goliath going down. This is going to be the new superstar, the fresh faces, just getting down with some of our more seasoned poets. We have Gail Danley in the building. We have Bonafide Rojas, New Eurekan powerhouse. We have the one and only W. Ellington Felton, aka Wes Felton. And then on the newbie side, we have his son, Tobias Felton, who's going to be delivering some stuff. We have Malpractice, aka Malachi Bird. We have we have the Youth Poet Laureate for Montgomery County. We have Ilana Ernst is going to be in the building. So it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a conversation between the new and the older. I'm not going to say older. And we're just going to see what happens, man. It's the WBL Word Power Fest. My name is Patrick Washington. Thank y'all very much for helping out. And I will see you all when I see you. Peace.